So here's the question of the day. How well has Season 2's Principal Charming aged over time? Is this an episode that has become more interesting with more context? Or is it a relic now, this odd experiment that didn't go anywhere? Sometimes it feels like no one really cares about Principal Charming, that it's this Season 2 episode that came and went, overshadowed by the Lisa Substitutes and Marge vs. Itchy and Scratchies of the world. I mean, when I did my ranking for that season, this didn't even make it into the top 14 semifinalists. Why should we care about this romance between Patty Bouvier and Principal Skinner when both characters went in dramatically different directions? Skinner's character arc, for example, was so defined by his relationship with Edna Krabappel. For him, it was all Edna relationship stories, Springfield Elementary stuff with Bart, and bickering with Agnes Skinner. Patty and Selma don't factor into his storylines at all. Principal Charming is like this false start for later Skinner episodes. For Patty Bouvier, this episode feels like an even bigger dead end narratively. Since officially coming out in season 16, Patty has made it abundantly clear that she isn't attracted to men. A story about Patty falling for Skinner seems like it would be hard for the audience to truly buy into, given that extra context. Kinda ruins the will they won't they when one of them is a lesbian, right? Also, Patty in general has an incredibly brusque, closed-off personality. One of the quote-unquote problems with the episode is that we get very little of Patty's point of view in the romance. She very, very begrudgingly gets dragged into this relationship, and even when she starts enjoying Skinner's company, she never expresses to the audience what he means to her, why she says she loves him in Act 3. I guess we don't get the why of Skinner's side either, but obviously his infatuation is well documented. Patty is such a cold fish in the story that in the lens of a traditional romance arc, her breakup doesn't feel as heartbreaking as it should. However, with 30 years of context, all of those romantic comedy criticisms have magically become the episode's strengths. There's a legitimate argument for Principal Charming quietly being one of the most interesting episodes of the first 10 seasons. The subtext has become its main draw. Let's look at how Patty is characterized in this story. At the beginning, she's making fun of her lovebird coworkers. We get that flashback in which Patty pushes this guy out of the way, ruining Selma's chances. Homer and Marge describe their dynamic like this. But I thought she was the one who didn't like to be, touched. It's Patty who chose a life of celibacy. Selma simply had celibacy thrust upon her. Then, later at the party, Patty only goes out there because Selma is too nervous. And later at dinner, is completely uninterested in flirting. In fact, she actively tells the most charm-free stories possible to try to drive this idiot away. She only agrees to go on a date because Selma pushes her into it. Then, when she's going to cancel, Selma insists she goes on her first date in 25 years. Since Patty is such a closed-off character by nature, that in its original airing, this situation could be interpreted in several different ways. Is Patty being a good sister to Selma by rebuffing Skinner? Was Patty so hurt by a previous relationship that she doesn't want to open her heart to him? Is Patty not even attracted to men? Is Patty not attracted to anyone? These are all reasonable questions one might have asked when Principal Charming first aired. It's funny, before I even knew the word for it, it almost felt like an early media portrayal of asexuality. The story doesn't portray Patty interested in anyone of any gender. She's just doing what she's doing, doesn't feel the need to go through any of these performative motions. Obviously, as we learn later, Patty is in actuality attracted only to women. And luckily for Principal Charming, the relationship is portrayed so sexlessly that there's nothing that explicitly contradicts that later characterization. Like there's no scene of Patty fantasizing about Skinner or staying overnight at his house. Instead, she pushes him away when he goes in for a kiss. And when they do lock lips, there's a sort of transactional quality, almost as if Patty's only doing it because she wants to make Skinner happy. From an interpersonal standpoint, the episode does a wonderful job bringing Patty and Skinner's personalities together, demonstrating her growing fondness for him. What this fondness means is ambiguous, but the fondness is still built up nicely. Skinner and Patty both have somewhat critical personalities, and using this dinner scene works well as the initial icebreaker. Then using the warmer, more pitiable aspects of Skinner's personality to draw Patty in further. They don't spend a ton of time building up the relationship since they gotta fit Selma and Bart stuff into the story, but by the time we get to this sequence, I actually do buy that Patty likes being around Skinner, is enjoying this relationship. It's nice to feel wanted, you know? Principal Skinner is genuinely kind to her. Patty can be closed off, but she's not a robot. Her sister Marge will be someday, but not Patty. Selma's part of the story, while more traditional, is executed extraordinarily well. As we all know, this is the beginning point of her long-running character arc, her search for love. Selma's loneliness is so devastating throughout this thing, singing Brandy to Lisa and desperately asking if she knows anyone, then just sitting alone in the dark in the kitchen, smoking quietly. Selma isn't my most favorite Simpsons personality, but she wants this so badly, you just can't help but root for her. Then later, she declares that she's giving up on true love and grasping hold of whatever she can. There's that quote, "Time to give away my love like so much cheap wine." She's so the opposite of Patty's standoffish approach with the audience. She telegraphs at every moment how bitter and jaded she's become. I know she adopted Ling in season 16, which makes her happy, but come on, Simpsons writers, find Selma Bouvier a man already, even if it's not Mo, jeez. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole again. Let's instead talk plot structure. Principal Charming is a sneakily well-constructed story. Like, obviously it establishes the Springfield Elementary bell tower and the grass killer and stuff, but even the way the story uses Barney, how he kicks things off with this barbecue stuff, establishing him as a giant slob, and then taking advantage of it in Act 3. Barney works well as the loser in this kind of narrative, where they can joke about what a crappy date he is, but Barney's easygoing enough that it's not that cruel when she dumps him. He bounces back so quickly. There's a lightness to these Barney jabs that works. I love how awkwardly Selma's like, and gets the hell out of there. One of my bigger negative criticisms of Principal Charming is that I don't think the close bond between Patty and Selma is conveyed especially well. The conclusion hinges on Patty describing that closeness as twins, how he needs to understand that she can't abandon her like that for any man. But there's not much introspection about their sisterly relationship, merely some bickering and Selma looking at old photos. Granted, the subtext of Patty's sexuality does improve this perceived weakness in the story, that there's more going on with Patty's decision than just the twin thing. Her decision suddenly feels more complex now. If the episode were able to convey Patty's internal feelings, whether we're talking about the text or subtext, I think this moment would hit harder. At the same time, Patty and Selma's lack of sentimentality is a big aspect of their characterization. Like this later moment at the bar is played perfectly. Selma asks, "Patty, are you throwing away your last chance at happiness just for me?" Patty says, "Yes," and Selma simply pauses and says, "Thanks." These two know each other so well, with such a tacit understanding of each other, that their lack of mushiness is oddly charming. I complained about the Skinner scene, but I absolutely love how underplayed this moment is. Patty and Selma are not flashy, extravagant characters. Also, this is going to sound like an insult to Patty and Selma, but I love how dingy and commonplace the aesthetics of this episode is. Once again, I am not insulting their looks. Patty and Selma are fine. When I say this, I'm mostly thinking of Homer. Just look at the opening shot they picked for this episode. Classy. Then we go to Barney pigging out and being a total wreck. The Foley artists really went out of their way in making Homer's stomach sound as disgusting as possible. Then we have Patty snoring on the couch, the rundown hallways in their apartment. Patty and Skinner's romance isn't meant to be this glamorous affair. I think the design choices do a wonderful job portraying the world we actually live in. You probably have noticed that I haven't really discussed Bart's part of the story in this review so far. I considered giving it the old, also Bart has a subplot about Grass Killer or something treatment. There's not a ton to Bart's storyline really, just a means to get Skinner involved, introduce Groundskeeper Willie, and to plant stuff to pay off later. But it does work as a change of pace, injecting some chaotic energy to this relationship drama. I do think they went a bit too far with Skinner letting the school go to hell. Yeah, it's funny and all, but I think you can tell these jokes without Skinner totally losing the plot. From a jokes perspective, I think Principal Charming is pretty dry, even by Season 2's more grounded standards. This one derives so much of its humor from its little character interactions, putting them in awkward situations and watching them bungle their way through. It's situation comedy. This is easily one of The Simpsons' most sitcom-y episodes ever in terms of comedic bent. There's not a lot of TV watching, cutaways, or slapstick to change things up. It's really just a couple classic movie parodies and Homer's Terminator-esque scanning for men. If you're looking for big laughs, you're probably not going to find them. This episode is going for something completely different. We all love how big and bombastic and surreal The Simpsons can be, but I think what makes Principal Charming special is how aggressively approachable it is. We have this very base-level romance story, starting from the meet-cute and first date, and then it's told in the most open-ended and ambiguous way possible, allowing the audience to approach it from multiple perspectives. Maybe you feel like Principal Skinner and remember trying so hard to win someone over. Maybe you feel like Patty and have felt pressured into a relationship that, deep down in your heart of hearts, you can't commit to. Maybe you feel like Selma, and for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened yet. I had commented how Patty's closed-off attitude to the audience makes her a challenging protagonist in a romantic comedy. There is the argument that if we got that peek behind the curtain, and this were explicitly a story about romantic situations that closeted people can face, that the story would be better. But as is, I think with 30 years of context, all those layers of subtext still remain present. Patty didn't feel the need to spell things out for us upon the original airing. We could have interpreted the story however we wanted. Today, we can all take our own personal experiences and project them onto the story. And most importantly, Principal Charming takes these different human perspectives, these diverging wants and needs, and treats them all with the care and respect that they deserve. Well, except for Barney, I guess, but he'll bounce back. If you haven't seen Principal Charming in a while, I recommend revisiting it. Yeah, this relationship didn't go anywhere, but it's one definitely worth remembering.